I never talked to her about it, right? Because it really bothered me. I saw another friend that knows us both, and I made the comment. And unfortunately, she passed it along to this person. So before I knew, the following time that we went together on the office, of course, she showed up and very upset, kind of angry, I will say. But it's good. It's good. Everything is good, actually. It was great.
Good.
Good.
Great traveling, great flying, great everything.
Good.
Wonderful.
Good. Well, we're glad you're back. Even though you stopped in a couple times with us, we are glad that it's the three of us again.
Yes. Yes, we're here. We're back. Good, bad, funny life.
There you go.
So today we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people experience, which is sometimes we're giving feedback to someone and we think we're just being honest. And unfortunately, sometimes the way the person receives the information is as you were trying to be hurtful or mean, even. And even though that's not our intention, that can happen. And then it runs the risk of us looking like we're rude. And of course, that's not good because then you're spending time trying to fix the relationship or the problem that comes out of that, right? So
Correct.
today we're going to look at times that we found ourselves in that situation. And hopefully, it gives opportunity for people listening to us to pick up on maybe ways we could have done something differently or how they can maybe work to give feedback in a way that doesn't run the risk of the same mistake of being looked at as being rude. So that's the plan for today. Sound good?
Very good.
Sounds great.
All right. So first, I'm going to clarify some things about communication, and then we'll dive into our questions. First of all, communication is bi-directional. That means it's not just about you giving someone information, but it's just as much about how they receive and respond to that information. So, direct communication, the intention is to be honest and clear in the feedback you're giving. Someone who's rude might give information in a way that is driven by an intention to hurt or be impolite or even insult somebody. And things like culture and context and nonverbal cues, which we've talked about in other discussions about communication, all play into the way that the other person receives the information or experiences that information. In addition to that, people's experienced or internalized bias can also play into the way that they receive your information. And so, even though we have the best intentions, sometimes those things influence how the other person hears and receives that information. So, the benefits of direct communication, because it is good sometimes to be more direct, is that it's efficient. Sometimes you can be a little more brief when you're being direct because you're not sugarcoating anything. It leaves less room for misunderstandings because you're, cutting to the chase. You're giving them the information in quick time. And it can build trust because someone who experiences you as someone who is clear and direct knows what they're getting, right? They're not second guessing what you're saying or you have other intentions. And so in the long run, that can be really beneficial. The cons of rudeness, and sometimes we might all do something with the intention of being rude, but the cons of being rude, of course, is that it can stir up a lot of conflict in relationships. You might even lose those relationships over it. And in professional settings, we know this, it makes you someone who's not easy to work with, and then you lose opportunities for growth or even promotion. So that is, in summary, some of the differences between direct and rude communication. So
All
we're going
right.
to start by talking about our own experiences with this. And the first question is going to be, tell us about a time that you thought you were giving direct communication and it was received in a way where the other person actually thought you were being rude. So we'll start with Aunt Lauda. In honor of Aunt Lauda being back.
Yay.
Right. Well, it came to my mind. I remember that time I used to work with a colleague that she is actually a close friend of mine since we met since we were in preschool, very young. But we happened to work on the same office. And this person is, is very loud, loves to talk a lot. So all the time she's interrupting, while we were working there, we were just, 4 or 5 of us. All the time she was talking, talking, talking. So, that sound like we didn't have the concentration of working, as it should have been. Unfortunately, I never talked to her about it, right? Because it really bothered me. So one of the future times, I saw another friend that know us both, and I made the comment. And unfortunately, she passed it along to this person, to the colleague. So before I knew, the following time that we went together on the office, of course, she showed up and very upset, and kind of angry, I would say, right? Because who knows what she was told. But she said, I didn't expect you to criticize me and these things, like very. So here I am, facing this situation that I didn't want to do it actually at the first place by mistake, not to clarify it. So I have to face it. And then we start talking about it. And I say, well, yes, I have to tell you, yes, it bothers me a lot because I'm concentrating, doing these follow-ups. And here you are talking about yourself and your personal things that doesn't have to do anything with the work, right? And of course, she got it up. Maybe, I don't remember well, but maybe I did a couple of comments that shouldn't have said, right? And of course, she applied to me what we in Mexico say, the law of eyes. I don't know if you have heard that before.
No.
So she didn't talk to me. We call it in Spanish, la ley del hielo. She stopped talking to me a couple of days, after that. And so here I am feeling terrible, right? Because that was not good at my end. So I finally, I say, for any action, there is a reaction, right? Whatever you say, like you just explained to us, it comes back the way they feel it. So I finally decided, to apologize, to talk with her and say, this is what I felt, and my mistake wasn't not to talk to you on the moment, on the right moment, and ask you to please give me some time at work. But so then, she started coming back as a friend, and nowadays we're very close friends. But yeah, that was a tough one. My mistake, my bad,
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how you think you could have done that differently. And we're definitely going to be talking about tips for people more explicitly, like having the time and the place to have certain conversations, right? And in that case, you gave the information to somebody else and it got to the person who it was about. And so we'll circle back. I mean, you had the opportunity to have the conversation with that person, but then you ended up feeling the consequence of that, like you said. So we're going to circle back to see what you learned from that, what you think you could have done differently, and
Exactly.
and so forth. But let's go to Mom. Tell us about a situation.
Well, I try to be, a person that remains calm and not to hurt anyone, and many a time keep inside something, instead of expressing it or waiting for something to happen. I have a tendency to make abrupt comments if it's about something that means something to me. And this time, in general, of unethical practices and violence, sometimes we take a stand and we may be rude instead of honest about it. I can think of a situation with this person, and I have let go many things. But in a particular time, this person mentioned something against a member of my family. And without being mad, I just, mentioned to this person that someone in her family was in the same situation. And she took it, and she took it, and she told me, I feel offended. And then I reacted as cool as I could, and I said, well, many a time we judge something and we don't realize we're in the same situation, like saying, this happened to you. But I think she took it as being rude. And I said, well, I'm just, being honest because we have a tendency to criticize or have an opinion without realizing we are in a same situation. And yeah, she was serious for a little while, but then I think, she realized I was just honest without trying, to be controversial or anything like that, but I stated something with honesty, I thought. But she took it like I was something rude.
Well, it was factual, right? And we're going to talk about that too. Of course, what she said about your family member probably struck a chord, probably was hurtful in some way. And the question is, was your response, though factual, also driven by emotion? Was it, could there have been a way to say that at a different time, or was it part of your intention too to hit the chord back, right? Like, oh, you want to hurt me, let me hurt you.
Let me remind you.
So yes, it was factual, and then I'm curious, was there a long-term effect? Did you feel like that person was bothered for a while, or was it short-lived? Were they just kind of in the moment taken
Well,
aback?
I think it took, it took a little time. And I understand, like you're saying, we tend to be affected mostly if it's something related to members of your family and even your own children. And I'm surprised that I reacted as a matter of fact, but I was pretty direct, something I'm not often that way. But yeah, it affected me. I felt it because this person had made comments kind of, there's these people that say, well, I'm very honest and I always tell the truth and it is what it is. That's true. But one thing is to be honest and the other is to be rude. Exactly. And that has very little to do with sincerity or honesty. When you say things that there is no need to say, really, or the way you say it. So I was pretty calm about it, but yeah, it affected, in this time I spoke with a honest fact, actually. I wasn't making up any story. But I guess the person didn't expect that I would say something.
Clearly, they did not. They did not. They did not. And I think that, highlights, I think, the difference between direct, honest feedback and something that could be seen as rude. Someone who constantly says, I'm just being honest, it is what it is, means you're saying, even if you think it's factual, you're saying things without real attention to intention because it's almost like saying, I don't care what the impact is. I'm going to say what I think I need to say, right? And we're going to talk about, when we get to tips, it's really important to examine your intention of saying what you're going to say. Is there a purpose, a useful purpose? Is it to be helpful, right? Because it could be harsh information, but it could be factual also. The two can exist. And it may be important for this person to know this for their own good and the good of other people they interact with that are important to them, right? So I think that gives me a good sense of that situation, and we'll come back and see if you think you would have done anything differently in that situation.
Exactly, because many people say, like, you criticize, I would never, or that would never happen to me. And if you think a little bit, you did, and it happened to you. And many a time with this particular person that is a little bit like that, I would say, just, brush it. It's not necessary to answer every single time. This time, yeah, I said, and I said it in a way not to be, hurtful. It was a fact.
It's fact.
But again, she was referring to something, to someone important to your life. So that's different. Like you say, it's who are you talking about or what are you talking about? Now you're more direct to me because you're going against my loved ones, no? Or something.
Exactly. Exactly.
And also, and this kind of mirrors a little bit of what happened to you, Aunt Lauda, because in not kind of caught off guard, I guess, talking with this other person about the third person, right? You were honest, where perhaps that could have been information given directly to that person, right? So this person talking about a family member, if they have something factual to say about that person, they really should be saying it to that person, not to them through you, or just to say something to you about them, right? That
Absolutely.
So we'll come back, we'll circle back and see if there was some other way you would have handled it, and maybe not, but I'll talk very quickly through a situation for me. And it actually involves a sibling because I am the middle child. We talked about that in another video, and I have an older brother and who I love. And growing up, very much was someone who looked out for me, a protector, whatever. So I think that's very much the role he likes to take on is I'm the protector and I have to fix things. And so I was going through something difficult, and I think he tried to reach out to me through text, and I wasn't in a place to really talk about anything. And I think via text, I said something very short, but very direct, which was just, I'm not in a space. You may have heard something. I'm not in a space to talk about that right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready, right? Which my perspective was, if we're going to talk, I want to talk in person or live, and I'm not in a space. I have to honor my own feelings at the time, right? That I'm not in a place to really talk about it. So I think that hurt him, and I think he kind of, stopped texting or whatever for a minute. Eventually, I reached out and said, "Hey, a couple days later, are you free to chat live to have a conversation?" And we did. And I said, I want to apologize first. I know that we haven't had a chance to talk. First of all, I don't want to do it via text because it's a very deep conversation and things can get misconstrued on text. And I also need time to process for myself, right? I know, and I said, I know you have good intentions. I know that you reach out because you care and you want to know how you can help. And I think sometimes the best way to help is to give me some time so I can figure some things out on my own first, and then we have the conversation. And then I said, also, this conversation is not for you to have a solution or to fix it. I just want you to listen. That's all. Is that okay? And I think, he recognized, like, I know I tend to like take information and right away want to problem solve. And I know there's things that I can't really help with, and that's hard for me to feel helpless, right? But I respect that, we all need that sometimes just to kind of handle things on our own. So I think the initial probably text response, it was very direct, but I think it was hard for him to be stopped and just like, hey, just stop because I'm not in a place to really talk about this. And it wasn't about him, it was some other situation going on. But I think following up with the live conversation and giving some explanation, I think helped him see why I did it the way I did it. And I think it was still hard for him, but I think hearing that I know you care, I know you come from a place of wanting to help, but sometimes you can't help. It's just one of those situations you can't really find a solution for. And you have to be okay with that, right? I think had him at least reflect on his own style
Exactly.
and like, okay, I have to slow myself down and respect the other person. And that's what they need right now. So that was that situation.
Wow.
Pretty
And
much.
it's important just to ask the other person when you think help, you want to help all the time. You need to ask the other person, can I help? Right? Or may I tell you some my feelings or something, like ask for permission because sometimes maybe for him is a big deal, but for you, you're going through something by your own.
Yeah,
And you don't need help at that time, I would say, someone to come and let you know
exactly.
what you should have done.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's totally appropriate to say, even if he would do it via text, is there something I can help with? Or if there's something I can help with, please, feel free to reach out to me. It gives you, either way, gives you the opportunity to say yes or no, I need space, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And that actually applies to this conversation too, because when you're ready to give someone some direct and maybe even harder to hear information, sometimes it's good to ask, there's been something on my mind. Is it okay if we talk about that? You know, and then
Hmm.
it opens the way to say, if they say yes, right, then to have the conversation. So that same skill out loud applies to this piece. But I'm
Okay.
curious, what goes into your decision to give direct feedback? Because sometimes, like I said, it is harder information to give someone. So I'm curious what goes into your process to say, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's start with Aunt Lauda.
First of all, it is for me very important to express, how I was feeling, especially when there is something professional involved. So I think, instead of me being upset or just taking it without expressing how I was feeling, I should have communicated to her how I was feeling at that moment and maybe not make it that big, right? So I learned that I need to be more direct, not just to hear things and be quiet. I mean, if it's bothering something, you need to speak up, I would say, right? So especially when they are interrupting you, or like this particular example that I have, and this person is only talking about so many other things except for from work, it's really annoying, right? So I think, yeah, it's important to make a decision right in the good time, to stop the situation to become greater,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Very true, because many a time you hold on, like in your case, something that is bothering you, or you don't want to say something that you consider is an honest opinion of how I feel, but you feel, well, maybe they're not going to receive it well. However, the more we keep something, it can explode really in rudeness, or, a confrontation we don't really need to have.
Exactly.
No. And then depends on the mood, right? On the mood of the other person, or in your mood, or whatever personal you're going through, situation. I mean, there's so many things involved in this that, like you just explained to us at the beginning, you need to understand what is the right time to come up with the correction, with an honest, comment or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you want to say it, but it's not the right moment because the other person is not in the mood, you
Yeah.
have to wait a little longer.
Yeah, for sure.
I know. And I know Tia Laura knows the person I'm talking about. In my
Yes, of
case,
course. Yes, of course.
when a person is constantly telling you their opinion, or
Oh my
they
God.
think
And,
they
and,
know
and
and you
to
don't
me,
know.
you waited too long.
Until it was
Because
something that really mattered.
this person knows who to make these kind of comments, right? Because this person knows me as well.
Mhm.
And very, very few, too, I would say even maybe one time that I remember, will make a comment like that to me. But honestly, she will never dare, this person will never dare to make any comments like, Anna, you hold a lot. I mean, you really support many things, and I'm not like that. I'm not that patient.
Patiently. And I try to be just honest. I don't know if I stated in a way that sounded rude.
Well, you explode. That's the
It-
thing, right? Then you leave it a little bit, and then a drop, and another drop, and another drop, and then sooner or later it's gonna come.
Well, like you said, you hold it in for long enough, then just takes one more thing, and then it comes out probably the way you don't really want it to come out. Because in the end, especially if these are relationships that matter to you, that are important to you, you don't want to run the risk of completely ruining that relationship, right? And especially if that's not your typical style, that might be enough to
Exactly.
make them say, whoa. But what in general goes into your decision? Because you say you do tend to be direct, but it also sounds, and we talked about communication, you can be a little passive. So what goes into your decision to say, I'm going to give this direct information, even if it doesn't sit well, or it's a little harsher, right? But it is factual.
Yes, because of course I didn't want to hurt this person. This person is dear, in a very nice person in general. Just happens to make honest, supposedly honest comments that I noticed hurt other people too. But in this case, I just thought she's talking about something that kind of criticizing or making a comment, and the same
Mhm.
thing more or less happened to her. So I said, I think it's a way, it's a time to let her know we need to think before we say anything. Because
Yeah.
usually when you
Good
criticize,
lesson. Good lesson.
exactly, when you criticize something, is something that you yourself have done. So be careful what you say, trying
Exactly.
not to hurt. But I thought, it's time to make a statement and say, I think that this happened to you. And I said, how? And she said, well, I feel offended. And I could have said, well, how do you think I feel? Many a time that you have make your honest opinions. But I didn't want to be that rude. However, I stated an honest,
I'm glad it wasn't me.
I didn't want to be that rude. This is a little bit rude. Yeah.
just a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Well, let's hit that up because what you're bringing up is it highlights, was your statement direct, honest feedback and also potentially slightly rude? What's your assessment?
Probably because I would make a comment like, well, this and the other situation happened to you, and it's about the same thing. And when she said, well, I feel like you offended me. And I said, well, it's an honest fact. I didn't want to proceed with more things exactly to make it worse, but just to make her, see is something that happened to you too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I could have said something maybe in a softer way because probably I sounded kind of, I hope not on the defensive. Being honest, it was just pointing out a fact. That's what I wanted. But I could have started with, it's not that I want to hurt you or offend you in any way, but I think, and then, express what I thought.
Mhm.
But I thought it was time to be honest. And in particular, I don't know why, I would let many things go by, like, makes no difference, say whatever you want to. I make my own decisions. But at this point, I thought, how can you comment this on a situation in my family when it's exactly what happened to you?
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate here because it sounds like what you're pointing out is that this person has a pattern of not necessarily about you or your family, but maybe even about other people or other situations of saying some pretty pointed things that can be seen as rude. In this case, she said something about your family, and your response basically was like a mirror. Well, you've also gone through this, so I'm not the only one who has a family member like this, right? Factual, yes. I am curious if your response was because something had been building up in you too,
Probably.
which is a feeling of you do this all the time and I let you do it, right? So that today it ends and I'm going to strike you where it hurts. And so I think that is always a key in deciding, like, is this the like you said, Aunt, the context, the timing to say what I'm going to say? What is the intention of this? What is the value of what I'm about to say? Is it to stop this person in their tracks because this is what they always do and they're just going to keep going? Is there another way to do that? Is this a separate conversation? Maybe in the moment you don't respond to it, you just kind of ignore it, and then later you pull them aside one on one. I don't know if you were with a group in that situation.
No, it was us too. But she had made honest opinions to other people and have actually hurt other people, and other people have uh, answered to that attitude before in other other situations, other comments, but they have already said something or the other. It comes to the point of the people that say, well, I'm honest and I tell you the way things are. Sometimes it's not a matter of honesty. You're being rude or you're really offending someone else.
And well, like I said, sometimes that's someone's entry point to say, well, I've warned you, I'm just being honest, right? And they think that forgives any impact it has on you because it's just a fact, it's just honesty, right? So I'm curious in your situation, Mom, I think that you responded to her poking you, right? By saying something about your family member, wondering if a better opportunity would have been to say, I'm going to have a separate conversation with her and say, I want to go back to something you said yesterday or the day before, whenever it happened. In this situation, you said this, and
Wow.
it's not the first time you have
Mhm.
said something that you think is honest, but is actually hurtful. And you also say, I don't care how people take it. It is what it is, which basically says you don't care about how it impacts people. And that is hurtful to me, right?
Yes.
Sometimes things are said and they are said in a way that is hurtful, and it really hurts me, and it hurt me in that conversation, right? That could be another opportunity to have the same impact, right? Of like, stop doing this,
Exactly.
right? But
Exactly.
it takes out the feeling of like, well, you just said that because you're angry. And I think you said you're defensive, right?
Could very well be. Yeah, I could have done it, on another occasion because, just like you say it, because I'm not the only person that, she had said things that
Mhm.
are openly rude, that has little to be
Mhm.
an honest opinion, is rudeness and hurting others.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I could have said not much, and then on another occasion said, like just like you said, I would like to go back to this comment because what I did say, what I did tell her when I answered, the same at the same time that this was happening, what I did say was, it's not, it's a, factual thing. It's
Mhm.
what I'm making a comment on, and I don't want to hurt you, but and I made her see that the same situation was with her. But I could have. I mean, I wasn't mad really,
Mhm.
or I don't think I said it in a way to hurt, but I answered right back.
Mhm.
Probably came to the point of several other comments that I said, you know what?
That's for
Have to
sure.
think, because I did
That's
mention,
for
you have
sure.
to think that when we make a comment about a situation on other person, probably something that you're doing or is happening to you, and you have to think about that
Mhm.
before you judge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to give time to Aunt Lauda's, and I think you kind of hinted Aunt Lauda for your situation. You kind of already talked about how maybe you could have done it differently. Maybe that could have been a direct conversation with that other person who ended up hearing about what you said and then was upset at that point. But I don't know if you would add anything else that you would have done differently.
Well, definitely I should know better. I should talk to her directly, even though she is a stronger character than mine, I would say, because she's always right.
Mhm.
But, expressing my feelings to her kindly, constructively, and consistently would have stopped the situation to that point, I would say.
Yeah.
Because every time that happened, I could have said, you know what? Let me work or do it in a different way, not really aggressive, but maybe understand her to make her understand that I'm in my workspace, right?
Hmm.
And it's not time to chat about personal.
Hmm.
But I didn't do it. I just, keep going, keep like we were saying, right? You just keep listening, and you're just okay, okay, and yeah, you tell me later, things like that. You have to stop. It will take you 3 seconds just to stop and say, listen, right now I'm very busy, or something like that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I did that afterwards, of course. And she's like, I know, but finally you get a proactive conversation, that is really fitting into a good relationship.
Hmm. And that's a good word, being proactive versus reactive. I think we can dive into some of the tips. You've both hinted at a lot of the tips. One is context, having the right place and time to have a more serious conversation or give more direct feedback, right? If it's something heavy, you don't want to be in a very public situation, even a coffee shop, because there's a lot of people. It could be embarrassing for the other person. You know, so right place and time, checking your emotions. We talked about that already, and that's the proactive reactive, right? You always want to like check yourself before you give the feedback. Am I coming from a place where I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm defensive, versus this is a clear message that I need to give. That goes into what's your intention, right? What is the purpose of you sharing this? Are you trying to be helpful? Are you seeing a behavior in someone that doesn't just affect you two, but other people too? And maybe it's hurting that person's many relationships, right? So there's an opportunity to say, I don't know if you've reflected on this, but I'm seeing what's happening. So I think it's important for you to hear this, right? And we talk a lot about intent versus impact. Even if you have good intentions, it can still be received as harsh or rude. And that's okay. And you give the person the space to say how they feel. If you've chosen the right context and timing, it gives them the space to be honest with you and say how it affected them, but also work towards solutions, right? They may have to sit with the information for a little bit before they figure out openly, okay, I accept that sometimes I do that. So I need to be more aware. I need to change some things. And we've talked a lot about being factual, sticking to facts, also sticking to behaviors, right? Not putting labels on people, but really addressing the behaviors. And so for someone who says a lot of negative comments, rather than saying you're someone who is hateful, spiteful, or just rude, you can say, the other day we were talking, you made a statement. When I hear those statements, especially about people I care about, I feel bad, I feel sad, fill in the blank, whatever the word is. And it gives opportunity for them to reflect on what they're doing so they know what they need to change also. But if you put labels on them, you're really going to probably get someone who's more defensive and not hear what you're saying. And then, of course, trying not to use insulting language, because that really takes away from the message you're trying to give them. And when you're emotional, sometimes that's what comes up is a lot of that kind of language.
Exactly.
So that's also, I have to really check your emotions. And then ask them, is there anything that they didn't understand that you said? Do they need clarification on something? Because, especially if they're hearing it for the first time, it may be harder to hear, so they're not really grasping it. Give them the space to say, did that come out clearly enough? Is there something that I said you didn't understand? That kind of thing. So those are some of the tips. I don't know if you would add anything else.
Well, I think, like you said, if it's an honest, supposedly honest opinion a person does to you, but it's hurtful or bother you, or haven't seen that the same thing happened to them, is either do it as nicely as possible or wait for another occasion. And like you said as a matter of fact, not hurtful or controversial, but you have made these opinions, and I just want to clear something with you, and be careful what you say, because we have a tendency to say something or criticize or be honest about something, and you're in the same situation.
Yeah.
And you know what? After you talk that way, being proactive clearly, the friendship or the person will get even more attached to you because now you're honest, right? You're expressing your feelings
That's
in a
true.
way that we have to understand each other, I would say.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people like this. If you did, like and subscribe. I want to thank the subscribers we have for listening. We have a lot more coming. Certainly put any additional tips in the comments as well. We'd love to hear what you thought about it and other things that you do to show the difference between being direct versus being rude, right? Let's help others. Well, I wanted us to introduce ourselves before we wrap up. And so we'll start with Mom.
Ana.
I'm Joanna, and my tia.
Laura.
And we want to remind you all, whether it's good, bad, or funny,
Leave it
live it
up.
Up.